Hey everyone, it's Kairos. Today we are doing a look just at the upcoming, 2021 preseason plans. If you don't know me, I'm Coach Kairos. I do a lot of jungle concept videos. I look at the macro game, jungle kind of pathing and things like that to help you climb in solo queue. And I'm joined with my good friend Bequipped here to help me out with this analysis.
Hey, I'm Bequipped, and I do a lot of clear frontier videos, which are like small optimizations on how to clear properly. Also, just stuff like breaking the meta a little bit, trying out new strategies, new item builds, new rune setups that people might not have thought of to essentially push the meta forwards. And today we were wanting to go over the posts that Riot has been making about preseason 2021 and some of their game plans on how they're going to be completely revamping the item system. And so I was thinking maybe we could go over. They made two posts on this. One was 2 months ago, just some general overview, and then a couple of days ago they released a more comprehensive post with some goals for every single champion class. Do you have both of the pages open for that,
Yeah,
Kairos?
I have both of these up and ready to go.
Okay.
And we aren't going to get super in depth on everything. We'll link these in the description for everybody to go
Yes.
and check out and read for yourselves in detail. But we're going to be kind of touching on some of the highlights that we pick out.
Okay. So shall we go over this one from 2 months ago real quick here?
Yeah, so they kind
Yeah, yeah.
of laid out a lot of their philosophies and what their plan is for the upcoming season. And so they outline the ideal system and they kind of grade themselves on some of these things. And I think some of the key goals that they came out with are that they feel like the items are balanced as far as snowballing, that it feels rewarding to snowball, to get ahead and to get big item spikes, and it's not overpowering and it's not insurmountable that people can't come back in game. So they're pretty happy with that part of the game. And then the other areas that they don't feel too good about are that they don't think the item system is very intuitive. That's the
Yeah,
kind of main
it's
area that they want to
really
fix.
hard, really hard to like pick up the item system when I first started playing this game a few years ago. I'd say it's probably one of the least intuitive parts of the game. It just doesn't make any sense until you've memorized everything.
Yeah, and it's a really
Uh,
big variance. I think that it contributes a lot to how people can climb. That a lot of people just figure out one build, they feel good about it, and they just force that every single time. And the
yes.
work that you put into kind of become an expert on different items and situational builds, you can maybe do that for one champion. So like a one trick pony might get that, but
Mhm.
across roles and across champions, it gets a little bit harder. And so there's just a lot going on.
Yeah. No, and then they also said that then they think it's like satisfaction using the items is okay. Reactive. Oh, I guess they said it was good. Reactive item choices just kind of okay, and I would agree. Like a lot of champions get pigeonholed into one build, not because the player wants to do that, but it's the only build that works on them. It's not a form of like skill expression. It's like, do you know the best math? If yes, pick this build. And then the one the intuitiveness of it is the poorest thing. So they want to make all of that better, and they want to make each item have a clear, unique, and single purpose. And they want there to be two archetypes. They want each item to fit a contextual purpose or a kit augment. So either reactive, like a buying MR against AP champions, or a kit augment, which would be kind of like Zonya's Hourglass on Fiddlesticks, I think, or Lichbane on Echo. So they want to make sure everything fits into those two things. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this first thing, or shall we move on to the next bit?
I think we can go on to. Do you mean to the next post or just to the next section of this of the goals?
Yeah. Oh, I meant like. Oh, okay. Do you want to talk about like the shop upgrade as well and all
Um,
of that?
yeah, we could touch on their shop upgrade a little bit. So they put these two pictures in that are kind of interesting that I'll pull up. The first one shows what the shop might look like. So this is where you mentioned it brings up the situational builds. And so the recommended page will adjust not just based on, what champion you have. Like right now, it kind of tilts me. This happened in Clash the other week that Mundo and Shyvana had Machete as recommended, which it makes no sense. Like ever, they would always take like their AoE junglers. They should take Talisman. But it goes even to like the level of recommending items based on matchups, like based on who the enemy team has, their damage profiles and things like that, and also the stage of the game. So those are two like really big ways that it adapts in a game state.
Does Shyvana run Talisman now? Because I know she runs Machete sometimes. But
I think it's a lot more healthy. So if you're bad like me, and you can't, and you don't kite well, you take Talisman every time, because you just take the AOE camps.
Right.
I'm not a clear god like you. Where I have
I'm not
options.
either. You don't know how many takes it takes to get those clears down. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this shop looks really good, and kind of my thoughts on the shop overhaul. Just in general, if it does look something like this, and here's the second picture that I've moved on to, that it kind of breaks down. Consumables are separate in their own little tab, and then boots are separate, and then you have your items that it'll recommend over time. So that kind of adaptive recommendation system, I think it really brings up the skill or lowers the skill floor. That basically anybody, it won't recommend an armor item if you're a tank into a full AP team. As I understand it, like that's not something that's just that people just do. And so it's going to be fixing so many problems for people who don't realize that they're even doing something wrong.
Right. And I think something that people like to complain about is this lowers the skill level on something. But I think something that's important to think about is like meaningful skill. Is navigating a shop menu a meaningful skill? Not really. Like, I'd rather remove that and focus on other more interesting PvP skills, like actually optimizing your item build. So making it easier to put items together and figure out what you should be doing is just a win-win. I think we should... go ahead.
I think I would look at it from kind of a slightly different perspective. So it is something that, just being able to click and navigate your shop, that shouldn't be, that shouldn't determine whether or not you win or lose a game. But the amount of time that people have put into learning, build optimal builds and, build variants on a specific champion, it's kind of taking a lot of that benefit out. And that I think that is like skill expression in the game. And it kind of reminds me, the whole discussion reminds me of jungle camp timers. So that's not PvP, that's decision making, and that's something that was automated a little bit. Where before there weren't the reset timers on the small camps, and now you get that of the hourglass, and so they've made jungle tracking a little bit easier. So where do we kind of cross over that divide where it becomes a skill thing that they're compensating for?
I think that information accessibility is a less interesting form of skill expression because it's based on memorization, whereas I think decision making based on information is far more interesting, and I would rather see more skill expression based on decision making, and the more information you provide the player, the more interesting and informed decisions they can make. So that, some people disagree. Some people think that the memorization part of it is interesting skill expression, but I don't think I agree with that. But that's up for each person's personal opinion. Shall we move on to? Yeah, of course. Shall we move on to the next part where they talk about specifically what kind of changes they're looking to implement?
Yeah, let's move over to that. And the last thing on this, I love that control words are now right at the top. I don't have to scroll all the way to the bottom for control words and consumables. Oh, that was tilting. Yeah. That's my last piece on that.
Yeah, I mean, you can make your own item sets, but like, really, do you want to make one for every single champion? All right.
I only play one champ, so it wouldn't be too hard.
Fair enough. Like one trick pony. All right. Let's see here. So the first thing that they're talking about here is stats and effects, and specifically healing and grievous wounds. Now, if you frequent Reddit a lot at all, you'll know that people are complaining about healing all the time. Conqueror, Ravenous Hunter, Taste of Blood, Death's Dance, Hextech, Gunblade. Everyone's mad about all this healing that every single champion has access to. Now, there used to be only Spellvamp and Lifesteal. So Will of the Ancients or Lee Sin's W would heal off castable abilities, including summoner spells. And funnily enough, neither Spellvamp or Lifesteal heal off on hits, but now they have 2 extra healing things that aren't official stats, but they work differently. There's Ability Drain and Omnivamp. So Ability Drain is just Spellvamp that heals off on hits effects as well, and sometimes can heal off AoE, unless explicitly stated. And so Ravenous Hunter can heal off Rift Herald's Eye and Wit's End. And then Omnivamp is like Death's Dance and Gunblade and Conqueror. And Conqueror specifically doesn't have a reduction on AoE healing. So it's the only Spellvamp type ability to do that. And I don't think that these are inherently a bad thing, but I think it's currently in an unbalanced state. But like it allows non-auto attack or single target champions to have access to healing, which they didn't really have before, which I think isn't necessarily bad. But Ravenous Hunt is too strong when it stacks up, but it's essential for some junglers to sustain in the jungle. Conqueror is really strong on AoE champions. I'm not 100% sure if this is even balanced. And then Hextech, Gunblade, and Death's Dance, I feel mixed on. Like stuff like Katarina and Akali use this way too good because they have AP and AD scalings, so they can use both these items at the same time. And then single target ability users like Aphelios and Ezreal take too much advantage of Death's Dance. So essentially, Omnivamp and Ability Drain are just better versions of Lifesteal and Spellvamp. So how do you balance this and create some sort of a meaningful trade-off? So currently, both Spellvamp and Lifesteal ignore on-hit effects for healing. So I think that on-hit effects should heal off Lifesteal to make it a more viable choice. And I think Ability Drain should be removed as a stat because it's just better Spellvamp. And it doesn't, and Spellvamp doesn't currently benefit fully from heal power increase. So it's like, why have that differentiation? So I think there should be Spellvamp, which heals off everything, almost everything, and Lifesteal, which heals off basic attacks, on hits, and special case abilities like Aurelia's Q, Ezreal's Q. So only have those 2. And then Omnivamp would be like a third pseudo stat, which would increase both, but preferably like separate values. Because like right now, you have like Death's Dance heals for 15% flat off everything. And it's like, why not do 15% Lifesteal, 10% Spellvamp, right? Like, why does it have to be both? It makes it harder to balance. I also think that when Omnivamp is used on a champion, there should be some sort of trade-off because you're double dipping into both. So I think there should be like some sort of diminishing returns on those things that provide Omnivamp. So maybe like Death's Dance provides full healing for 4 seconds and then starts to like diminish off, because I think these items are designed for team fighting, but they turn any champion that uses them into a drain tank. Like you have Aurelia with Death's Dance and Conqueror drain tanking 5 people. Like that shouldn't happen, but she should be able to use that healing to add more like tankiness to herself for in a team fight, but not for that long. Like I think if you really want sustained like healing against like, you know, someone when you're split pushing, you should be speccing into Blade of the Ruin King or Bloodthirster, which are not as good in team fights. So I think it should be diminishing returns. And then also like I think that like as far as for Spellvamp, right now it's like reduced effectiveness on AoE abilities, so like 5% instead of the 15% in most cases. I think instead of doing that, they should AoE ability should have full healing on one target and then increased diminishing returns on other targets, like massive diminishing returns. So you can't abuse like healing off a minion wave, but you'd still be able to do healing in like 1v1 scenarios, or like against single target monsters if you're like a jungler, because I think that's something that a lot of AoE champions get screwed over, is they just can't 1v1 people because their kit happens to be AoE. Like, and it's like, sometimes it's not even a big AoE, it's like a small AoE, and Riot's just like, nah, you get only a third of your healing. So I think being a little bit, allowing them to act as a single target champion for the purposes of healing is good. And then I think most champion kit healing is fine. They mention here that they want to reduce Grievous wounds effectiveness against small amounts of healing, but like have like a sharp increase against high amounts of healing. And I think most inbuilt champion healing is okay. I know that was kind of long. I had a lot to say about healing. I think a lot of people have to say about healing. But did you have any like stuff that you have written down about healing specifically?
I had a few thoughts on Grievous wounds and, well, healing also, kind of just to say, I feel like I'm not sure how much of this is coming from Riot overloading champions a little bit. I think, well, the last two, I don't think Yone or Lilia have inherent sustain, but like you mentioned, through the runes,
yeah,
you did plenty of work on Lilia to show that she can sustain just fine in the jungle, which she might not be like designed to do that. She doesn't have any built-in sustain, which is interesting. Or
she might have been balanced around the healing runes, which in that case, if they reduce those, they can choose to add healing into her kit, right? It's like this sort of barrier.
Yeah, it just seems like it's too easy to overcome that barrier of like gaining sustain. It's too easy to gain sustain through the runes and through the items. Anybody, like you said, anybody can become a drain tank if they just build Death's Dance. It's kind of a meme at this point. And then I think that this will hurt, and we'll talk about this later, hurts bot lane quite a bit because usually the AD carry is responsible for building the Grievous wounds. They have to go get the mortal reminder. And so if you're already behind, you're even further behind, or you just don't build it, and then you're still behind, but you can't keep them from healing. And so it just becomes that game of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't build Grievous wounds. And it feels like you have to build it in every single game just about. And my argument on Grievous wounds is that it just feels so underpowered, because if there are 2 champions or 3 champions with heal in their kit and they're using items and runes to boost that healing, Grievous wounds doesn't matter. Like, they just blow right through it. It does not matter at all. I was playing Kled into Aatrox, and I mean, his Q has built-in Grievous wounds now, and I had Ignite, and I had everything, and I think I got a kill early in the lane phase, and it just didn't matter. Aatrox healed right through it. And so it just feels kind of like neutered, like Grievous wounds just has no potency. And I thought of something kind of creative, because the 3 items that you have for Grievous wounds right now, you can get Xyz, you can get Bramble, or you can get Morello. Those are the 3 options. And I was... it seems like, so the 2 cheap options,
and then like Thornmail and Mortal Reminder for like the
the upgraded the upgraded versions. So the cheapest way to get those are Xyz and Bramble, and those are only single target. And so Thornmail, they have to hit you, and it's a single target. And then Grievous, you have to hit them, and it's a single target. And so I was thinking, what if they took something like the Abyssal, like the aura from Abyssal, and applied that to something like Thornmail, or if they put another jungle item, that there's an aura around that applies Grievous wounds on people around you. That'd be a really awesome tank item. That if you can go like attack you're on the front line, and then they can't just have Soraka sitting in the back healing everybody for their entire health bar every 2 seconds on repeat. An aura would be really cool, because they don't have to hit you for that to proc, but their backline is still safe. They're not effective. Yeah, and so I think that's a really cool solution.
That's a meaningful trade-off too, because you have to put yourself in danger to apply the aura.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my contribution of Riot. If anybody from Riot hears this, if you consider Grievous Wounds as an aura, I think that would be really interesting to balance around, because it might not be as strong because it's it's an AoE ability, and I think that could be a cool switch to play with. But that's all I have on healing and Grievous Wounds.
I think specifically they were saying it feels like Grievous Wounds counters certain champions in lane too much, but then doesn't counter people that stack healing, and they want to change that. Because like sometimes you're playing like some healing champion like Fiora, someone buys Bramble and you can't do anything now. Like it's like okay. Yeah, and that feels bad. So like I feel like they want to make it so there's like a baseline level of healing that still works against Grievous Wounds, but when you start to heal too much, then Grievous Wounds starts to kick in a lot more. So I think that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they could make it so like buying like a big item like Thornmail or Morello or Mortal Reminder increases the amount of Grievous Wounds. That'd be kind of nice. But anyway, what were you saying?
Yeah. Oh, I was saying, I think that's all we got on that. So I was ready to lead us into the cooldown reduction rework.
Yeah.
So they are changing it from cooldown reduction to ability haste. And I know that you've done a lot of research on this. I haven't done as much, and so I'm going to take it away from here to explain it to me and to everybody else listening how exactly this is going to work.
Yeah. It's not actually too hard to understand, like if once you like dig into it a little bit. Essentially, cooldown reduction is a reduction in your cooldown. Pretty simple, right? Ability haste is just an increase in abilities used. So 50% cooldown reduction is halving your cooldown. So let's say your cooldown is 10, now it's 5. Ability haste is just, let's say you have 100% ability haste, then you can cast abilities 100% more, or double. So 50% cooldown reduction is the same as 100% ability haste, if that makes sense. So what the issue with CDR is they've outlined here, 10% CDR was 11% more casts, or 11% ability haste, while 40% CDR was 66% more casts, and 50% was 100% more casts. So like the more CDR you had, like 10% each time wasn't a linear scale, it was exponential. So they had to cap it, because otherwise that'd be too much, because you jump from 40% to 50% CDR and you get like 34% more ability casts for 10%, whereas from 0% to 10% CDR is 11% more casts. So what ability haste is, it allows them to smooth out that curve into something linear. So 10%, ability haste is 10% more ability casts. So because 100% ability haste is 50% CDR, if you do the math, then I think that when they make this change, I think that an item that had 10% CDR will have somewhere between 15 to 20% ability haste. It's not a 1-to-1, but I think that basically this will make, if they end up going with that, then early on, ability haste is going to be a bit more effective than buying early CDR is now. But as you buy more ability haste, it will be less effective than CDR is now. But the nice thing is you don't even have to think about this, because it's just going to scale linearly. So buying early ability haste will probably be a pretty good option. But like stacking a ton of it won't be as viable on as many champions. You'll have to like really like make your build kind of weird to get a lot of ability haste. So it's kind of finally a trade-off, because a lot of people on Reddit I've seen complaining about too much CDR on too many champions. You just get it for free. This is probably going to help with that a little bit.
I agree, and I think you summed it up pretty well there. And a lot of champions, I mean, you can just get that quick early CDR, and it's going to be more effective for you early on. But I mean, even though it's uncapped, that may sound cool, but I don't know if there are any champions who really want to get up to, I guess it'd be the same champions who are beyond 40% CDR, like, I don't know, Karthus or something, but then you're trading off. So this is where they come into kind of the balancing act that they were talking about, which is really cool, is that they don't, if you want to get ability haste, you're going to be losing out on ability power. And so I guess we'd be thinking of champions, that have just really high base damage, and they want to go through a lot of rotations of their spells. They might, put a build, make their build revolve around ability haste and just really stacking that out.
Right.
But I think that is going to be really, really niche.
Yes.
And so it'll be cool to see how it plays itself out.
I think it's going to be particularly good on champions with low scaling on their abilities, with like, let's say a low scaling shield, like with like 20% AP on it, right? And it's like really bad scaling, and you can just spam that shield to become more tanky. Or someone with a high impact CC ability, right? That's going to be really good too. I can see it being good on stuff like Vel'Koz because he can proc his passive a lot. But yeah, let's move on to Tenacity here. Did you have anything you wanted to mention about Tenacity here?
I didn't have a bunch about Tenacity in this section. They're kind of just clarifying some of it. So CC, it really, or Tenacity only applies to some CC, but then not to others, and so they're kind of just smoothing that out for the most part.
Right.
It'll reduce the duration of knockups is the main thing, because that was kind of like one of the only things that it didn't apply to. But it won't apply to displacement. So things like Set Ultimate, Vi Ultimate, Swain, Pull, things like that, because... And it mentions, because the purpose of that CC is movement. It's not about like CCing for someone for a really long time. And so I think that'll be really good for just bringing clarity on stuff like that.
Yeah, and something not mentioned here is that I didn't actually know about. I looked this up. Tenacity cannot reduce CC below 0.5 seconds. So if you have a short duration knockup, don't worry about this change. So like Aatrox, you're not going to be affected, right?
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah. I didn't know that, so that's
stuff like
touch.
You can thank the wiki. The wiki is great, unless the wiki's lying to me. So someone feel free to test that. But stuff like Lee Sin's ultimate and Blitzcrank's hook are displacements, so they won't be affected. A lot of displacements are 0.5 seconds, so they wouldn't be affected either way. Like Vi knocking someone aside with her Q. They don't mention anything about cleanse or QSS, so my guess is that the strength of knockups will continue to lie in the fact that you can't cleanse them, and that QSS only works on them when combined with a flash or a dash. So I wonder if certain champions will have the CC duration of their knockups increased, like Zax's E. And I wonder if Ornn's Brittle will increase knockup duration now because it counts as tenacity reduction. So Ornn might be getting a shadow buff here. Maybe, kind of. And then they also mentioned stuff like Vi's ult will have a suppression added, and suppressions can't be reduced by tenacity, but you'll still be able to escape with QSS and flash, or QSS and dash. And then I also reckon that Yasuo and maybe Yone will have suppressions added to their ultimate because they have a long animation that locks them out of doing anything. So it feels really bad if their targets escaped their CC before they finish the animation of their ult. That would feel terrible. So I imagine at least Yasuo will get some suppression on his ultimate. Jungle items. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, I'm stoked about this because I think that mainly because I saw what happened. They compare this to the support item changes, and I think that that's been pretty successful. That you just pick up the jungle item, you do the quest, you don't have to go back and like spend more gold. You don't have to do anything with it after the fact. So my initial thoughts on this are that this could go to one of two ways. So you just grab your starting item. There's no additional, pickup. It might just be Machete Talisman, or they might add a few more. That would be really cool if there were a few other options, because right now it's basically just, are you AoE or are you single target? Okay, pick one. And so if there are more options for a little bit more nuance, I think that'd be really cool. I couldn't even think of what those would be. And so the way that this could be good is if you pick the jungle item and then as you upgrade it through the quests, maybe at certain number of camps cleared, you get the first quest done, and then you get to pick what kind of smite you want. because that would be the natural progression right now. You would either get blue smite or red smite. For most junglers, you'd get that first before you get the other piece of the jungle item. So maybe that's the first quest. And then the second part of the quest is you get to pick, the health, attack speed, AD, or AP. I think that'd be really cool if you could pick, like, in-game, you finish your camp, finish your quest, it comes up with this option, kind of like Aphelios picking stats that you get to pick what upgrade you want for your jungle item. The way that this could be bad is if you have to opt into a build path at the very beginning of the game. So if your health, attack speed, AD, or AP, whatever those are, you have to decide at the beginning. And so you have to say, okay, I'm getting this item, because that's how the support items are set up right now, that you have to pick, okay, am I getting health, AP, what am I getting here? But if you're locked into that, you have no flexibility, especially for bruisers and things like that. If you snowball, you build AD. If you don't snowball, you build tanky and you're more supportive. And so if you have to make that decision at the beginning, that's going to be a really, really bad deal for junglers.
Is there really that many? I guess if you're choosing between snowballing and not, that's true. I guess specifically with Warwick that you play a lot of, that is a constant battle. It's like, do I build Cinderhawk or Warrior this game? There's not a lot of champions that have to make that decision, but for the ones that do.
Yeah, for the ones that are, and I was trying to think of a few other, Jarvan, Olaf. Yeah. Some of those decisions are made in runes before you even get into the game. That's part of it. I get that. But Olaf, Jarvan, Vi, kind of mainly the bruiser types that if they snowball, they can go AD. For the AP junglers, it's not really the same case. You go Runic Echoes no matter what. Right.
I hope that they'll just leave it to Machete, Talisman, whatever other things they have. Maybe some options that provide more sustain. And then the smite upgrades. I hope that they'll leave it at that, and then you have to base for the enchantments. I'm fine with that personally, and that would give you more options there.
Yeah, I agree, and I kind of started brainstorming ideas for smites because right now it's red smite and it's blue smite, and those are pretty boring.
They had more, but like people didn't use them.
I did because I was a tank player. So first off, bring back stalkers, please. I miss that so much.
Wait, you mean not stalkers?
Trackers.
They had trackers. The one with the AOE and the smite.
That was the one with the wards. That was the one with all of the wards.
Oh yeah, no
trackers.
I think trackers was too strong. I think that's why they stopped.
It was too strong and competitive. It just made the game super uninteractive. I get why they took it away. I want it back though. But a few of my other ideas, these are ridiculous. But one like shreds resistances. So if you see a team that's going to be stacking armor or AP, you take that smite. So that's a situational thing like a Trundle ult. You could get one that's lifesteal. So if you're trying to duel people, it's similar to red smite, but like lifesteal. Or one could be bonus smite damage. So if there's a Nunu on the other team and you're just a normal jungler, you get the bonus smite damage smite so that you can actually contest objectives.
Everyone would run that.
Maybe, but there's no other benefit. So you don't get a slow, you don't get dueling. True. That's all it does. Kind of like what trackers did. So I think there could be some really fun smite ideas.
That's fair. I would like to see Skirmish's Saber split up into different items, because right now it's just like me duel you, me OP, me mini exhaust and ignite at the same time on a 60-second cooldown or whatever it is. And I'd like to see that split up into some different things. So yeah, that could be definitely interesting. I was focusing more on I'm hoping that the changes they'll make will make it easier for more junglers to full clear, because there are some junglers that they have to choose between Machete and Talisman, and they basically can't full clear like on their first clear, whereas other characters can. And I feel like Riot was trying to make more jungle routes with the Season 10 jungle, but there are certain champions that just don't have any options. And I'd like to see it maybe like the first jungle item you get combine both Talisman and Machete like as the starting item. I don't know if that's like...
I wonder if there's one that you could have Machete, Talisman, and then you could have one that gives you Ability Haste, because they could then use abilities more frequently on their camps, and then they could clear it faster and therefore healthier. Maybe that's a way to deal with that, but that would be pretty OP in like early skirmishes.
Well, I feel like it's the single target junglers that struggle with the AoE camps rather than the AoE junglers struggling with the single target camps. Sans Lilia. Lilia just struggles.
Yeah.
With single target, but then so I hope they address that issue with full clearing on a lot of characters. Because there are champions like Echo that can't even jungle properly without Ravenous Hunter. So if they nerf or remove Ravenous Hunter, they need to address that. They need to address jungler sustain somehow. I also hope they'll add more enchantment options. I'd personally love to see some more secondary late game enchantments that allow me to make my jungle item more slot efficient when I have 6 items. Because sometimes you're faced with this issue where you want to sell your jungle item, and that feels kind of bad. So for example, I'd like to see options to buy a percentage armor or magic resist boost to my Cinderhulk, so I don't have to build only HP tank items. I'd like to see options to add some HP or lethality to Warrior, some lifesteal or bonus on-hit damage to Bloodrazor, or some extra AP or CDR, now Ability Haste, to Runic Echoes. And one final point I'd like to make about Cinderhulk is that it's actually got a lot of issues. It's only good for farming the jungle. It's incredibly gold inefficient early game. I think it's like 60% gold efficiency. It's terrible. It forces you to only build HP items and only becomes 100% stat efficient after 3 or 4 HP items. It has terrible damage to champions compared to Sunfire Cape. The range is awful, doesn't allow you to kite jungle camps without losing out on the damage, and you can't toggle it off when you want to tower dive. I really hope they'll address some issues with Cinderhulk. I think adding that burst damage when you're CCing someone was a good start, but I think that Cinderhulk needs a lot more work, and the slot efficiency of jungle items needs to be made a lot better. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about jungle items here?
No, I think that's a good point, and it'd be cool if they had another option for tanks of like a maybe armor and magic resist enchantment or something.
Yeah.
Like that. That'd be kind of cool. So that's like maybe another way that they could take it. But
I'd like to see them add that onto Cinderhulk. To be honest, I'd like to see them add it onto it.
Might be broken.
Well,
it might have to be separate.
I mean, as like an additional purchase, like a secondary,
like an Ornn upgrade, basically. But
right, like I'd like to see there be two upgrades to it, like every single item, because Warrior feels like, there's like a lot of bruises that buy Warrior, but it adds no tank stats. They want some HP on it, and they're like, well, screw you, no HP, or like some lifesteal, and it's like, nope, you don't get any. Like, and Cinderhulk feels really bad on them because it's gold inefficient, right? Because it's not efficient unless you're buying a bunch of HP. I think a lot of people don't know that, how gold inefficient Cinderhulk is. Cinderhulk does not make you very tanky at all. It's really gold inefficient until you buy lots of tank items. And then meanwhile, Warrior and Runic Echoes have 150 or 160% gold efficiency without their passive, so it's like, okay. Bloodrazor just needs some additional late game buffs, I think, like to lifesteal or attack speed. Anyway, did you want to talk about Marksman Items next here?
Yeah, we can get into Marksman Items, and kind of a lot of what we're going to see for the rest of the notes is just how they want to increase just the agency and increase the options and situational builds for all classes. Right. Marksman, mages, AP assassins, tanks.
Right. Like they were saying was like the kit augments or situational buys, I believe they said in the previous post.
And so we're going to see a lot of the balancing acts of how do we make these champions strong and feel like they have agency and that they can carry, and at the same time that they don't get too far ahead. The items aren't overpowered so that when you snowball a game, it's just over. Like it's already done. So Marksman, I think that the main point here that they're trying to to address is this thing that they call agency options. And so that's ADCs always feel strapped to their team and like they can't do anything unless their team is good. And so they're talking about adding items or readjusting items so that they could have some agency and play on their own, maybe more safely, just situationally be stronger individually, be able to fend for themselves, but losing some AD and some carry potential so that they aren't. So there's either like glass cannon or self-sufficient.
I think this is a fantastic decision to make, especially for balancing pro play, because marksmen have always had reduced agency because of what they are: ranged, undodgeable damage with no cooldown. So this is objectively low counterplay for enemies, right? So they have to give marksmen low agency. But this is rough for like solo queue marksmen because they feel like they can't impact a game before it's already been decided by their team. So letting them snowball off of one item might be a nice change. They said they want to make one item buys feel more impactful. But also in pro play, where they probably are going to build full damage and they have team play, they can build their full damage build, but in solo queue you have these options. Like the reason Ezreal tears up solo queue is because he can build Iceborne Gauntlet and Death's Dance and like 1v2 people if he's ahead, right? He has tons of agency, so people love him. How do you think they're going to make this first item spike feel good on ADCs? Do you have any idea?
I think what it would have to be is probably just making it cheaper, or like having a few tier 2 items instead of legendary items that are just cheaper. They're more affordable and that hit decently hard. Because nobody builds a Zeal item first. It's basically like you got to get a BF sword, and so that's 1,300 gold, and then you need at least like another 1,300 to get a full item, and that does not happen easily. And so I think that it's going to have to just do with economy of making some cheaper items. They might even be items that you sell later on that are like they could make them that they're not that expensive to buy and that their resale value is better than the average item. That might be a way to do it. I think that there will for sure need to be accompanying nerfs to Draven, Callista, and Lucian if these items are like really, really good. Because if the items are good and those champs can use them efficiently, then they're gonna hit really, really hard. And so they'll probably be balanced around that. As necessary. And I think I'd be interested to see how they do that.
I had a couple ideas on how they could possibly do this. I think that they should make some changes to crit chance. I feel like crit chance is kind of this archaic system that needs an overhaul. I think that an idea I had is maybe making crit chance more effective when you have less of it, but only if you're a ranged champion. Otherwise, Yasuo, Yone, Tryndamere will abuse. But then, and then as you buy more crit chance, it's still effective, but the Zeal items are a lot cheaper, right? And so it still increases your DPS gold efficiently, but it's not as like, it's you spike more at your first item. And then I'm also hoping that if that's the case, then I can see marksmen buying 1 or 2 crit items, then speccing into like utility agency items, and you'd only go full crit if you're like playing Jinx with like a full comp to protect you. Something else I'm hoping Riot will do is like make crit less RNG dependent. So I'd like to see something where kind of more similar to Ashe, or perhaps something where every auto attack against a champion increases your crit chance, and then when you hit 100%, then every single attack crits, but before then none of them crit. So having higher crit chance will make you stack up your crit faster.
Yeah, that's kind of like what they've done with Stormrazor, of that guaranteeing the crit on the first end for kind of that early. So it's kind of like the same idea, except the opposite, that it's ramping up over that, kind of like Jack's passive of the attack speed ramping up. That's interesting. I think it would be worse.
I'd like to see them. Go ahead.
I think it would be worse for champions that take Hail of Blades, because they are front-loaded damage. They're like, I
Yes.
want my damage on the front of this trade.
So
Like Draven and Callista and Lucian, like those ones that we mentioned of like it's fast trades, it's
yes.
heavy hitting. And then if you gave them crit after they've been like stacking up on a fight, then they're just gonna be monsters.
I think that you should specifically with those with I feel like specifically to make it so attack speed champions don't like benefit too much from something like this, you could make it a certain amount of time in combat, and the higher crit chance you have, the better, like the faster you get there. But like someone like a Tristana with a over 100% attack speed steroid isn't going to unfairly benefit from this crit chance.
Yeah.
And I think also it would allow ADCs to carry fights if they stay alive for long enough while dealing damage, which I feel like is the ADC fantasy. No ADC feels like they should be able to one-shot someone, unless you're Draven, right? But they do feel like they should be able to carry a fight if they stay alive for like 10 seconds, right? And then they should be able to kill everyone. I feel like that plays into that fantasy.
Yeah. It's kind of
And
the
I'm
concept
also,
of
yeah, go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I'm also interested to see AD armor items like they were mentioning. There's only Guardian Angel and maybe Iceborne Gauntlet if you count that, but
And
go
Death
on.
Stance. But Death Stance is like core now. On
Oh
AD
yeah,
carries.
right. I forgot about Death Dance. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And it just makes them super tanky apart from the armor. And I was kind of gonna mention that's along the same lines of like that's the whole premise of Press the Attack and Conqueror, that you're ramping up over time, and so that's something that AD carries like, but that it doesn't feel that good because in a late game team fight, like Press the Attack doesn't matter. Like it really isn't. It doesn't matter. Like if you get to hit a champion. Yeah, if you get to hit a champion like 4 times, then they're probably already dead. Like if they're getting CC'd and you can like stand there and free fire them, they're probably already dead. Like stacking your PTA isn't that big of a factor late game. And one thing I was going to say just on the topic of marksman, this we don't have to spend too much time on this, but that it seems like the core items are pretty stagnant just in the role. That it's kind of like, oh, these items are good, so we're going to build them, and like, or like this is just what you build on the champion. Like the first 3, maybe 4 items on a lot of champions are the same, and kind of the only exceptions in terms of like build path and how you play the champion are like Kaisa, you could go 80 or AP for a while. Varus, there was the lethality and on hit. There was some variance there, but outside of those two, like most of the champions kind of just have their build path. Then they might add 1 or 2 situational items.
Right.
Like every couple of games, they might switch it up. And even Kaisa and Varus, it was like, in this meta, this build style is better, so I'm going to do this. It was very rarely like, oh, I could go into this game and I could pick either one. And I would love to see more of that, of like you go into the game and then you're rewarded for recognizing like your enemies, kind of like, I think that's a skill factor that if the shop automatically does that for you with itemization, I want the player to do that, not the shop to do it.
I agree.
And so I think that would be like really cool if there's just more variance in the kits, like what we've seen with Kaisa going either 80 or AP and the Varus multiple builds, that I want to see those opportunities in a given game. Not just like in a different meta or like this week this is good, but then they nerfed it, so you go back to this other build. I want to see like options like that.
Yeah, no, I think decision making around that stuff is very interesting. It makes you feel really good when you're able to like counter people with those decisions. Okay, mages. Let's see here. So I'm excited to see what they do to artillery mages. Xerath, Ziggs, Vel'Koz, Lux, even AP Kog'Maw, they've been mostly left by the wayside, especially in pro play. So I'm hoping for some sort of bonus damage when you're like a certain distance away from a champion that rewards you for landing long-range skill shots that are harder to land. I'd really like to see that. And I'm also looking forward to what kind of items they'll have access to earlier on in the game, and maybe some items that sacrifice late game for like greater early game agency. Because mages generally can't do a ton besides chill back and wave clear, which doesn't feel that Like, it's not interactive. Um, and then also, like, just the ability haste builds that they're talking about here. I'm hoping to see some cool stuff where like Ziggs is just spamming his bombs at the cost of their damage, because there's some mages with like low reliability ranged skill shots that just can't land anything because their cooldown is too long, and Riot's obviously scared to buff it. So if speccing into ability haste to spam more of the Ziggs bombs to zone the enemy at the cost of some of the damage is something you can do, then I think they should totally do that. It sounds super fun. Was there anything you had about Mage Items?
Not really. I just kind of agree with you. I think ability haste would be the most interesting change to that class. Like
Yeah.
the post says, they have really good options for late game. Early game feels a little bit stagnant, kind of like AD carry, where there's just this item's good. You build that on pretty much every champion.
Yeah.
But I think ability haste will really open things up if they balance it well with the trade-offs of, okay, I have less AP, but I get to spam these a lot more. I think that'll
Right.
be really cool, and it lends itself into like team fighting and really expressing. It's not just a stat check. It's
Right.
using your abilities, using your cooldowns, and like playing around that more than just I'm a Karthus with like 800 AP and I just get to one shot everyone. And so
Right.
that'll be a cool interaction to see how they balance that and kind of the play styles that come out of it.
I
But that's all I had.
As a longtime Vel'Koz player, like I'm looking forward to choosing between a high AP build where I like in like a team fight where I burst 5 people, or switching to an ability haste build that I run Liandry's on and I siege and I poke the frontline tanks and like just kite away from them and don't team fight them, right? Because I feel like mages like often have to be played into a team fight comp. I think an ability haste build, when you've got like a Tryndamere top and like a master Yi jungle, and you don't have like a good front line, you can spec into that ability haste build and have some more wave clear, have some more sieging potential, and not have to be a team fighter. I think that'll be really, really good.
And they might have to balance around mana as well with ability haste because you're using a lot of mana. And so
Yeah,
that's one
that's
thing
what
that
I'm
I had just
thinking.
now thought of that. I think that the mana might be a good cap on ability haste strength.
I think just reducing the amount of AP on ability haste builds, more mana and ability haste and less AP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, both those.
Yeah, and you can, Vel'Koz Q, lots of slows. You're just specking into utility. So AP fighters and AP assassins. Did you have anything to say on this initially?
Honestly, I don't. I got nothing going on
No,
with AP fighters and assassins.
I'm gonna go over this real quick. So a lot of people complain on Reddit about AP fighters not having viable builds. Like they have to build like an AP item and then buy Frozen Heart or Iceborne Gauntlet. It's terrible. Like it's the only way they can survive. So like Rod of Ages, for example, is supposed to be like this healing HP AP thing, but there's no CDR and it takes so long to stack. Abyssal Mask may as well be called Abysmal Mask. The range is terrible. Tanky AP items don't provide any CDR like Liandry's Rylai's. There aren't any healing options since Hextech Gunblade has AD. Death Stance is AD only. Spell vamp items like Will of the Ancients were removed. Zonya's Hourglass and Banshee's Veil are much more skewed towards burst resistance than sustained damage. And then AP fighters rely on runes like Conqueror and Ravenous Hunter just to survive in fights, which isn't healthy. You shouldn't be surviving on a rune to exist as a champion. I think they need more hybrid items. They talk about adding more hybrid items where you get some AP, some HP, maybe some healing, maybe some CDR. So you're not having to build 3 or 4 items just to get your core stats. Like you can build them all at the same time, kind of like AD fighters do. As far as AP assassins, I think they're actually doing pretty good. I would just like to see some more options for Oblivion Orb, because like lethality, you have like Serrated Dirk that gets built into Yomu's, into Duskblade, into Edge of Night, into Sanguine Blade. Oblivion Orb with the Magic Pen, Morello, nothing else. I would like to see some more options there.
Yeah, and something that kind of my main thought is like if you're a mage or like if you're an AP champion and you want armor, it's basically Zanya's. That's like Zanya's is the best item. There needs to be something else that's not so broken. Like what makes Zanya's so strong is that you get you have the stopwatch and then you get the Zanya's on a pretty decent cooldown. But there's no other like good armor item. And so I think it would be really good if there was another one that had like health and armor and cooldown, or health and armor and some AP, or just armor and AP. I mean,
I'd like to see an AP Death's Dance. I honestly like some not maybe without the broken bleed, the broken passive. Healing. Yeah. Well, I'd like a little bit of healing, a little bit of resistances, a little bit of AP. I don't think Death's Dance. I'm actually going to talk about this in the AD fighter item. I think the reason Death's Dance is so overtuned is because of the fact that there isn't something to fill the gap. They talk about this. They only have Death's Dance and Sterak's Gauge for AD fighters for a sort of damage and tankiness hybrid item. And because of that, Death's Dance has to be OP so these champions aren't terrible. I think if they add more options like that, then you can nerf Death's Dance. You can add, and if you add these sort of options for AP fighters, that more hybrid tank and damage options, you can have an AP Death's Dance of some form that isn't terrible, like Rod of Ages. Maybe they can buff like the. You heal on spell casts, because that's what you're supposed to do with Rod of Ages, but you heal like 10 HP. it's terrible. Yeah. So maybe something like that.
Yeah. Should we segue into AD fighters, since we were kind of
exactly
on that track anyway?
Yes.
And AD assassins. I mean, that's kind of, you could probably group them together. It's AD champions. I just want to get to the tanks as fast as possible because that's me.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on this. I mean, it's like I said what I said on AD fighters about Death's Dance being overtuned because there's no hybrid items. AD assassins, they talk about choices beyond ordering. They usually just stack all the lethality items in some random order and call it good. I'd like to see more nuance that exists in AP items like Zonya's Hourglass and Banshee's Veil. I think that Edge of Night and Sanguine Blade are great steps towards that goal. I'm looking forward to seeing more unique lethality items for AD assassins. Not really sure what kind of things they'll make, but I think the AD fighters and AD assassins are doing somewhat okay in items. Just a little bit of a touch-up will be okay. So tank items. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, and tank items, I pulled up and I made two little groups of armor and health. There are so many items. They give you armor or health. I mean, there's Gargoyle, Deadman's, Randuin's, Thornmail. There's like Warmogs. Yeah. Then you can do Sunfire, Righteous Glory, Knight's Vow, Zeke's Convergence. Like there's so many options for armor and health. Like I think that's pretty decent options. Yeah, Deadman's.
Yeah.
And then MR, it's like Spirit Visage, Adaptive, and Abyssal, aka Abysmal Mask. And then Gargoyles gives you half, and like Zeke's Convergence gives you a little bit. But honestly, MR feels so specific. I mean, it's basically like, are you going to build Spirit Visage or Adaptive? Oh, they don't have repetitive spells. Okay, it's Spirit Visage.
Yeah, and then you don't even have any healing on your kit. Then it's like wasted stats. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's so much potential there for a magic resist item for tanks.
Yes.
There's like a lot of room in there that is just completely blank, and especially like something that has a decent active or something like that, because all of these just have the passives. So if there could be something else, because that's something where they're talking about making the champions kind of felt a little bit more, that they want to just give tanks more utility, and to create more value for their team. And so the armor items do that great. I mean, in my opinion, that the Gargoyle, you can just go in, tank a ton of damage. Thornmail, you get Grievous Wounds. If that was an aura, like I mentioned, that'd be insane. That'd be great. Warmogs, you can just be a poke shield forever. Deadman's is and then Randuin's, you get that little slow that's kind of meh also.
Deadman's is pretty good for chasing people down. I feel like it's honestly more of a bruiser item than a tank item sometimes, but it's very nice for getting that. It's very nice on champions that don't have copious amounts of CC or like an engage ability that need to run up to people.
Yeah, and then I think on the MR items, like looking comparatively, there's not as many, and they're so specific. Like they're very specific in when you'd want them. Like Abyssal boosts AP. Like cool, that's great. If you have a bunch of AP on your team.
What if you're Scion, right? Like Scion is a perfect example. Which MR item do you buy as Scion? If you don't have healing, right? Except maybe on your passive, when you die, what if they don't have an Azir or something that you need Adaptive Helm for, and you don't have that much magic damage? You have your W and your E, but your Q and your ult do more. So
you go Spirit Visage with Grasp, and you just heal off the Grasp.
Yeah, it's like it feels really bad. Good. Yeah, it feels bad.
Yeah, so MR items for sure need to be rounded out for tanks. That's kind of my soapbox. And they mentioned late game capstone items. Like we talked about earlier, of kind of the capstone on the jungle items would be kind of cool, just a little addition. Something like a death cap for tanks would be sweet. Although tanks, let's be honest, rarely get to their 6th item. Like rarely get to their 5th item even. So it would feel like really good to have that extra oomph in the super late games.
I would like to see for Magic Resist a MR, HP, and CDR item that focuses on burst resistance. So maybe it has some sort of magic damage shield. Like it's like a MR locket. Like, and maybe you're against like 2 AoE mages. You're against Brand and, Vel'Koz, and you want to provide some sort of magic resistant shield to your team. I think that should be an option, right? Like something like that. Yeah. Like there's not really a burst resistance focused MR item.
Because armor, also, you have the gargoyles. It's really solid.
Oh yeah, I get there is gargoyles, yeah, but that's only for you, and it's like mixed, right? Yeah. I'd like to see something that focuses on magic resist. But specifically, what I want to see an armor focus item with HP and CDR. Like Omureka was removed, and all that's left is Righteous Glory, Knight's Vow, and Zeke's Convergence, which have like 20 to 30 armor. I need something that has 60, 70 armor, some HP, and some CDR. It doesn't exist. And it feels really bad on Cinderhulk junglers, because I feel like if I want CDR and armor, I have to get Frozen Heart or Iceborne Gauntlet, and they don't provide HP, and they don't stack with the Cinderhulk passive, which feels really bad. And
it feels kind of wasted.
Yeah, like your Cinderhulk isn't doing work at that point. That's why I think there needs to be resistant boosts on that item, but nonetheless. So that's something I want to see. And then what else did I want to see here? They mentioned here that they want to have situational items, like if you need to match a split pusher or protect a carry or engage. I'm interested to see what kind of items they want to introduce so that a tank can match a split pusher. Not really sure how they'll address that without making that OP. Maybe like the less people that are around you, the more tanky you are. That would be like an opposite of Gargoyle Stoneplate. That would be interesting. I'd like to see something like that.
And then that would bring in the strategy of collapsing on the split pusher as a team. That you bring 3 people to dive them, because that's the only way that you can actually do that.
Right.
And so then that brings out an option. Yeah, that's like that would be pretty interesting. It's like the reverse Sanguine Blade.
Yeah, it's like split push tanks like Scion are like going to be more viable. inting Scion back in the meta.
Right.
Let's see. And then I actually personally find MR items mostly good. There just needs to be that one extra option, I think. One extra MR option that's really going to make it good. They're almost there. And then looking forward to seeing what kind of utility they can add to tanks. Mostly it's just Righteous Glory and Knight's Vow right now. Don't know what they'll add, but we'll see. Like the MR burst resistance, I'd like to see that. And then not sure how they're going to add the late game items to tanks without making them feel too strong. Although sometimes you do feel like tissue paper as a tank in late game fights. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they do that. Is it going to be like you get extra HP? Is it going to be extra resistances? Is it going to be like on passive? I don't know.
Yeah, if it's something like a percentage, that would be huge.
Yeah, I just hope they don't make it too strong because like tank metas aren't particularly well loved, but tanks aren't picked as much right now, so maybe they could use a bit of a buff. Cinderhulk needs a buff, I think. Anyway, anything else you wanted to say on tanks?
No, we can get on to our last part. It's enchanters.
Finally, enchanters. So they mentioned too many actives. I agree that that's kind of rough, and I'd like to see more item actives that focus on specific scenarios, like Mikhail's Crucible against CC. I think that's great. A lot of the actives feel like they're tacked on. Like, was it Zeke's Convergence? That's like when you use your ultimate, you do like a storm thing. It's like, okay, like that feels like just some random thing that they added.
Yeah.
Like, what's the scenario that you buy that?
Yeah, I don't know, and there's a lot of forgotten support items. I feel like Shirelia's is kind of okay.
Shirelia's is kind of cool, but like it adds like here's another thing is like they add like random stats like mana regen. HP regen is super frustrating to see because it often feels like something you don't need but you have to pay for anyway. On tanks and enchanters, like stop adding HP regen on my Righteous Glory. Like stop. I think if they buff artillery mage options, then HP regen as a separate item for both tanks and enchanters would be fantastic because it's like, oh, they have poke mages, I buy HP regen for my team. I have some sort of regeneration item that regens my team against poke mages. Like that would be really cool. But right now HP regen feels really bad. So I'd like to see more like focused items that don't tack on 25 trillion stats.
And it mentions that, it feels like some items are just good at everything. And so why build items that are good at one thing when you can get another item that's like a little bit worse than that item, but it's good at 4 other things? Like there's no reason to not go for that item. And so I think that they could make them just take the items that you already have and then emphasize their strengths and then take out that unnecessary stuff. And I think that could really clear up a lot of the kind of that decision making and just give a lot more options.
Right. No, I agree with you on that. Like especially with enchanters who don't really need to diversify multiple things into one build. Like for example, Death's Dance. Like fighters often need the bit of AD and a bit of resistances and a bit of sustain, right? Enchanters don't need that. Enchanters are like counter champions. Right? They are designed to counter other kinds of champions. So I feel like introducing those specializations into enchanters would help them feel more intelligent when they buy an item that like counters the specific kind of champion that they want to stop, rather than they just me buy Ardent Censer because me have shield. Like, and yeah. I think that's...
Yeah, supports are smart, and we should treat them like they're smart.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely hard to manage all those active items, for sure. And then, let's see here. I think that was pretty much everything we wanted to talk about here. There was some stuff on Reddit where they were talking about stuff, but I'll link the Reddit post in the description, and you guys can flick through the comments and have a look at some of the things that they said. They go more into like ability haste and stuff like that, but yeah, this was a little bit longer than we were expecting, but I hope that this was helpful.
I told you, I warned you.
Yeah,
you were like, oh, it'll be 20 minutes. I'm like, not a chance. I know you too well for that.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I'm not good with my time management. All right, well, I hope this was helpful. And thank you so much for tuning in.